So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. It is finally draft day. Today, the Detroit Lions will add at least 2 more members to the team, and over the next 3 days, the Lions have 8 different picks across 6 different rounds in order to add to this team and truly solidify it as a division contender, a conference contender, and a Super Bowl championship contender. Now today, before the mock draft or before the actual draft starts at 8 p.m., I wanted to give a final mock draft, a combination of predictions of what I think is going to happen, what I want to see happen, and how I think the Detroit Lions can build their team into a perennial division and Super Bowl contender. So with that being said, let's get right on into taking a look at the 2023 Detroit Lions final mock draft. Now, at number 6, I have the Detroit Lions selecting Jalen Carter, defensive tackle from Georgia. Now, I think if Jalen Carter is there, he will be the selection for the Detroit Lions. I think that there is no reality where the Lions willingly pass on the best player in the class, even with some of the character concerns, even with some of the off-the-field issues. I don't see a world where the best player in the class talent-wise is available and the Lions say no. Now, if this was the first year of the rebuild, if this was the second year of the rebuild, then it might be a little bit different, right? You have to establish that culture. You have to build the people you want in the organization in order to build the culture that you want. But the culture is already there. The culture is already strong. There are already people that want to come to Detroit. There's already that sense of family. There's already that, work hard, grind it, blue collar culture that they wanted to bring in the first place. So they're at a spot where they're strong enough now to support a player like Jalen Carter. They're strong enough to take a player like that under their wing in the draft and help him reach his ceiling, help him reach his potential, and keep him on the right path to make sure that he doesn't get in trouble off the field anymore, to make sure that he becomes the player that he can be as the best defensive player in this class. And again, if he's available at all at 6, because I think there's a chance he goes in the top 5 still, I just don't see a world where the Lions pass on Jalen Carter. He is just simply the best player available. Now, at pick 18, I have Deonte Banks, the cornerback out of Maryland. Now, Deonte Banks is a little bit on the smaller side, I believe just over 6 foot, but has 4.3 speed, has incredible hips, has good ball skills, good hands, good eyes, is patient, doesn't really get grabby, doesn't get penalized very often, and for the Maryland Terrapins last year only allowed 258 yards in coverage the entire time. Now, he did allow 4 touchdowns and only come away with 1 interception. That is slightly concerning, but from an athletic profile, from a tools standpoint, he is an incredible cornerback. I think he's a top 4 cornerback in this class. Elite speed, great feet, great hips, didn't allow very much in coverage, went toe-to-toe with Marvin Harrison Jr. and won a large majority of the reps, and just is a really good cornerback. Wouldn't have to start immediately, wouldn't have to be the guy on day 1, but could certainly step in and compete to be that boundary cornerback on day 1. I think this would be a great pick for the Detroit Lions at 18, really solidifying that cornerback room and just kind of, putting together, again, the best defensive player probably left on the board. Now, another option here would be Joey Porter, but I think I like the speed and I like just some of the other traits that Banks has just a little bit better. Moving now to 48, B.J. Ojulari. Now, B.J. Ojulari has really good length and decent size to be an NFL outside linebacker / edge rusher. He has power, he has bend, and of course wore that very historic number 18 at LSU. And for anybody that is unfamiliar with that number, if you wear 18 at LSU, that means you are a leader and a captain on the field. You are a leader in your community. You are a great person off the field, and you are just kind of the guy on that team. You're the leader on and off the field. You're the leader in the locker room. And of course, you have to be a good player to do that as well. I think if the Lions are going to risk something like Jalen Carter at number 6, they're going to go back to their roots somewhere in the second round. They're going to get a player that in most draft classes, I think would be a first round pick in BJ Ojulari, 25 and a half sacks or 25 and a half tackles for loss, 16 and a half sacks over his last few years at LSU. He's a good player. He's a good athlete. He's a phenomenal leader on and off the field. Very much fits the culture vibes that the Detroit Lions have been doing, kind of fits the mold of like, maybe not necessarily needing the player so much, but really liking the talent and of course loving the culture fit, loving the character, loving the person. I think that this is a Detroit Lions pick simply because I think he would fit the culture so incredibly well. Now, Jonathan Mingo is my pick at 55, the 6'2" wide receiver from Ole Miss. Now, Jonathan Mingo last year put up over 800 yards and 5 touchdowns in an extremely run-heavy offense with relatively poor quarterback play. He did not have a good quarterback and actually had a rotation of quarterbacks at times because either health or just talent-wise, they wanted to move quarterbacks around. So he never really got to develop chemistry with his quarterbacks. He never really got a really good groove in the season because Ole Miss started to develop some injury concerns, and they ended up moving him into the slot where he was less productive, but still obviously did some good work. He's somebody that you can see winning down the field, somebody that has 4.46 speed, and to me is probably the best true X wide receiver, or at least true X build in this entire draft class. He catches with his hands, unlike Quentin Johnston. And even though I don't think he's quite the athlete that Quentin Johnston is, the RAS scores say that they're incredibly similar. I see a great athlete in Jonathan Mingo, if nothing else. And again, he catches with his hands. He does not let the ball hit his chest. He goes up and high points the ball every time. He's a competitor. He blocks really well at Ole Miss, which I think is going to be a factor the Lions absolutely love out of him. And again, he's that 6'2" field stretcher that can be your long-term X wide receiver at 55. Now, at 81, I think the Lions go with Jair Brown, the safety from Penn State. 16 takeaways over the last 2 years, 10 interceptions, good ball skills, great instincts, good tackler, good leader on that Penn State defense, the most efficient defensive back from that Penn State defense over the last couple of years, and that includes guys that went in the second round like Jaquan Brisker a season ago. I think Jair Brown would be the easy replacement for CJ Gardner-Johnson if he does leave. And if he doesn't, this is a guy that can play slot. This is a guy that can play in the box. This is a guy that can play deep. He is just a really versatile weapon, would easily contribute on special teams early. And of course, if CJ Gardner-Johnson leaves, you have that. If Tracy Walker ends up leaving after this year, I believe he has 1 or 2 years left on his contract and is getting a little bit older. Jair Brown could be the long-term extension for that. I think it future-proofs your roster. I think it adds talent immediately. It gives you kind of another chess piece for the defense in case of injury. Again, anybody that takes the ball away 16 times over 2 seasons is a player I want on our defense. Now, going down to pick 152, a big drop-off because of the lack of fourth-round selections. The Lions are going to take DeMarvion Overshown, the linebacker from Texas. Now, DeMarvion Overshown has had some injury concerns in his career, has switched positions in his career at Texas, and admittedly has some question marks. He's not super heavy for a linebacker, is obviously relatively new to the linebacker position, only switching after his sophomore year after playing defensive back, and he just needs to learn the position better. But with that being said, he's a player that in his career at Texas has 30 and a half tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 3 picks, 3 forced fumbles, and 3 fumble recoveries. He's a 6'3" linebacker with a DB background and covers like a defensive back. And the Lions need somebody like that. They need a coverage specialist. They have, Malcolm Rodriguez, who's smaller, really good versus the run, great player, but just undersized. Alex Anzalone is a good size, but just really doesn't have the coverage instincts that you need out of an elite coverage linebacker. If we need a player like Tremaine Edmonds, we want a linebacker like Fred Warner who can cover tight ends and cover wide receivers and, bail into deep zones and be that elite coverage linebacker. I think DeMarvion Overshown is perfect for that role. You're not going to put a whole lot of wear and tear on him because he's not going to be an every down, 3-down linebacker early in his career. He's going to be a coverage specialist. He's going to be a third and long, obvious passing downs type of player. but slotting into essentially a 6'3" safety, 6'3" defensive back into your linebacking core on passing downs would just tighten up windows, would make it so much harder to pass on the Detroit Lions defense and help out the passing defense in the intermediate game so incredibly much. Moving down just 7 selections later, the Detroit Lions are going to address the offensive side of the ball. Now, this has been a defensive heavy draft other than Jonathan Mingo up to this point, but the Lions are going to go to offense late in the class. They're going to look to add some playmakers, and one of those playmakers is going to be Israel Abanikanda, the running back from Pittsburgh. Now, he has home run speed. I believe it is pro day actually clocked in somewhere in the mid 4.3s for speed. He has good power, good contact balance, and again, a running back from the ACC that rushed for 1,400 yards and 20 touchdowns last season alone is a player that I would absolutely add to the defense. He wouldn't be a premier back, wouldn't be a guy that takes more than probably 100 carries, 100 touches a year, but you give him a screen pass, you give him an outside zone, you give him a couple handoffs a game, and it's a player that's going to probably break off at least one big run every single game that he has, right? You give him 5-6 touches, one of those is probably going to go for a big play. He has the contact balance, has elite home run speed, and I think a combination of Montgomery being the workhorse, DeAndre Swift being the receiving threat, and Abanikanda being the change of pace, home run hitter, player that can get the ball once and take it 80 yards to the house is a good running back trio. And we know the Lions have had running back injuries in the past. If you needed to rely on Israel Abanikanda to be a kind of 100, 150 carry back, if Swift goes down early and you need another complement to David Montgomery, I think he can do that just as well as anybody in this class. 183, this is a little bit of a reach. I don't know if he's going to be there, but he was there in the mock draft itself. So Jake Haener is going to be the quarterback of not necessarily the future, but certainly the backup quarterback for this season. An underrated quarterback from Fresno State. I think he is a good processor, makes good decisions, has enough arm talent and athleticism to survive in the NFL. Over 9,000 yards at Fresno State, 68 touchdowns, only 18 interceptions. I believe not last year, but the year before had well over 4,000 passing yards, less than 10 interceptions, over 30 touchdowns, looked like a really, really good player. I'm not exactly sure why the statistical drop-off was this season. I know he played 3 less games, but just didn't have the statistical success this year that he had 2 seasons ago. So I think that's part of the reason he won't go very high in the class. But as far as a backup quarterback that's going to bring some excitement and could probably win you a couple of games if need be, I think Jake Haener could be the option for the Detroit Lions at 183. And then TJ Bass, the offensive tackle from Oregon, a good offensive lineman, only 3 sacks over the past 1,000 pass blocking snaps in his entire collegiate career at Oregon. A really good pass blocker, brings some power, brings some depth. I think giving Hank Fairley another guy on the offensive line that if injuries arise, or if you need to move some people around, or you just need to rely on some depth as a 6th or even 7th offensive lineman, I think you could do a lot worse than TJ Bass at 194. There weren't really too many needs left, so just addressing probably the best offensive lineman left on the board and getting a guy that over 1,000 pass blocking snaps over the last 3 years has only allowed 3 sacks in that time. So with that being said, that is my Detroit Lions final 2023 mock draft. You get the best defensive player in the class. It does come with a character risk, but if he works out, he will be a top 5 player at his position. You get a top 4 cornerback, a great leader, and a great another pass rusher for the Lions in BJ Ojulari, a potential future X, a potential future starting safety, a coverage linebacker, a home run hitting running back, a backup quarterback, and of course a depth offensive lineman. I think this addresses every single need the Detroit Lions have going into the class while adding playmakers, adding a lot of talent, and feeling like a Brad Holmes type of draft class. So with that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about this final mock, what you want to see the Lions do tonight in the actual NFL draft. And of course, we will be back later today at 8 o'clock as the NFL draft officially gets underway to live react to every single pick in the first round. So with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, and like the video. Turn on bell notifications if you don't want to miss Detroit Lions content. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you both so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions!